Welcome back, everybody, to the Habitat Podcast YouTube channel video series. I've got a special guest tonight from Illinois, Mr. Sammy C. Carrozza. How's it going tonight, my friend?
Good. How are you, man? Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, I'm doing great.
Couple guys with a face for radio trying this YouTube thing, huh?
Well, we were texting earlier this week about nicknames, and you said you didn't really have one. Sammy C was, I think, the best one you can come up with.
That's the best I had, yeah.
Yeah.
You had a good one, Weasel, right?
Yeah. I don't get to hear that too much anymore since my dad passed, but
He was the one that started that one?
Yeah, when I was about 4. So I don't mind. People think like, oh, you don't want to be called Weasel. That sounds kind of derogatory, but since my dad passed, it's kind of nice to hear it.
Yeah. Cool. Very nice.
Yeah. So you had one hell of a season, my friend.
Agreed.
I mean, that's putting it lightly. So I wanted to kind of do a recap of your plans going into this season as far as habitat goes and transferring into the hunting season. We, like I've mentioned on the last video, we talk a lot about habitat improvements and how to do them and where to do them and when to do them, but sometimes we get a little bit lost on the actual putting everything into effect with the hunting execution. So especially like Al and I were able to harvest 2 mature bucks on his farm, and you were able to harvest 2 mature bucks on your farm, and that's not even counting what your father got into. So, but I wanted to take a deep dive into that, kind of walk us through the backstory. I mean, I think everybody knows you by now, but if you want to do a quick intro of yourself and then kind of just walk us through the backstory of how you ended up with this latest farm you have.
Sure. Yeah, Sam Carrozza from near Chicago. I sell medical devices in Chicagoland area, and then I travel out to my little safe haven about 2.5 hours west in west central Illinois, where we have property with my dad. We've owned some properties in the past, and I grew up hunting on an uncle's property and just never quite had the right fit. We started with 40 acres, my dad and I, and we sold that piece, and now we ended up with our current farm that we just couldn't pass up an opportunity for. So, it's got a super old farmhouse on it that the family likes to come and enjoy. It's been a fixer-upper. We've had some headaches with that farmhouse and everything, but it's been fun. But the property itself has been phenomenal. Reason we're ready to jump all over this opportunity was it's butted up against about 400 acres of no hunting. There's a golf course community not too far away and a lake community and all that. So, but immediately north of our property is a really nice sanctuary, which, as you know, everyone's sitting on everyone's fence lines as it is. So to have a couple borders that we don't have to worry about anybody is phenomenal. So we bought that property at the very end of November of 2020, and we're here at 2024, and I just had the best season of my life. And it's funny, I've hunted Illinois my whole life, and I've never even killed 2 bucks in one season. It's a 2-buck state, and everyone says, "Oh, you have such a luxury of shooting 2 bucks," and I just never had the opportunity or never got that chance. So,
right.
But, going into this year, we had a lot of bucks that we were keeping an eye on, and a couple of them we were keeping an eye on for several years.
Well, let me back you up for a second.
Yeah.
There. This 2 years leading up to this, were there a lot of major changes you had to do to the habitat, and what were they?
Well, when we bought it, it was a blank slate. I mean, right off the house, there was 12 acres of tillable. Other than that, there was no food in place. Previous owners, they went out and gun hunted. They brought in their family, and they all did pretty well, honestly. But they didn't put a whole lot of effort into the habitat side of things.
Okay.
And I heard stories that they would drive their ATVs up through the ridge in the middle of, November and get their stands up 4 days before the gun season starts, So, so with a little bit of effort, I mean, we've put in a lot of food plots, of course, and we've started TSIing. We were starting to basically trying to make every acre usable in one way or the other, right? So we have 188 acres, good chunk of ground, and it's kind of long and skinny. So it has a lot of border to it, which is good because sometimes we realize that if you're sitting on the west end and the east end, we're about 1.25 miles away from each other, which is pretty awesome. You have an opportunity to hunt very different deer rather than a 188 square.
Right. What was the lowest hole in the bucket, do you think, when you got it?
Well, that's funny because we are in farm country and we've got hundreds of acres of corn and soybeans around us, and for half the year they're living the high life. But there's so many deer on our property that once that crop comes off, it kind of turns into a parking lot, and these deer are starving to death. And I've been trying to convince my dad that these deer are stressed in their lives because there's just so dang many of them. And not enough food to go around. In order for us to grow a corn or soybean plot, I think we would honestly need 10 acres.
Yeah.
So to have that kind of investment and that kind of space is tough. So the farmer that farms our 12 acres said, I can't do corn and soybeans in there, even though it's up against 100 acres of row crop. So he said, I got to put alfalfa in. And honestly, that's the best decision that we ever made. And it was kind of forced upon us, but that was the best thing that ever happened to us, was having that 12 green field.
I was kind of excited when you told me that you were putting some alfalfa.
Yeah.
I'm glad it worked out for you.
I mean, that pops up in March and it's green till they're out there till January. We're in snow season and there's 30 deer out there at night, So that was huge, having that much of a destination food source. With that being said, it still gets destroyed. I mean, it doesn't get very high, but, so yeah, trying to find ways to feed these deer is not easy, and it's become difficult growing food plots. These last 2 years, we've had these droughts, and the plots are just not jumping out of the ground. And if they don't jump out of the ground, they're getting nibbled too hard by the browse pressure. And even with 1.5 acre food plots or whatever it is, so I've had to kind of start adding some more clovers in there because I feel like that might take some pressure off, and of course we're doing TSI to try to get some woody vegetation. We also got the place logged 2 years ago, which was absolutely game changing. I'm sure I've talked about that on this podcast for some of you guys, the listeners, have been here for 2 years, but there was a 20-acre ridgetop that was very, very mature, where you could see 300 yards. And now I can't, I actually got lost going up there for the first time this summer. I got turned around a little bit, and everything was shoulder high or over my head, and I couldn't see where I was going. But so yeah, we changed the landscape completely up there. So that's kind of our sanctuary, and hopefully adding a lot of food. So
awesome.
A lot of projects in the works, and sometimes it's overwhelming dealing with everything and meeting timelines, being 2.5 hours away, but it's
working full time, raising a bunch of kids.
Right. It's been a lot, but it's been fun. I've been completely obsessed with it since we bought the property. So
yeah, well, it's paid off. I mean, you've really hit your stride here, I think, and moving forward, I think it's going to be the same. So let's catch up to this year and talk about kind of what your goals for the habitat were and for the hunting season.
Yeah, for the hunting season, we knew we had some, like I said, bucks that we were watching for a while. And, everyone said this is going to be the best growing season for antlers because we had a mild winter last year. We had that early spring with a lot of rain, getting the vegetation up and running early in the spring. So we were excited. We had 2 bucks that we thought were going to be 170 and above at 5 years old. I don't think either of those deer made it quite that high. So, it's interesting. We still saw deer that didn't jump like we thought, and so maybe that great growing season was over, a little bit more than we thought it was going to be. But, but anyways, it seems like all the deer.
What's been your experience with that in Illinois? Is it kind of based on just genetics of each individual deer, or have you seen certain years that are wetter that have produced bigger?
I don't think I've ever correlated anything. This is the first year where it's been an outlier as far as weather's concerned. And
okay,
some deer made some jumps and some deer disappointed us. So I don't know if it means a whole lot, but it was fun to watch. What I do think happened is that mild winter, the survival rate. Usually we lose a third or a quarter of the deer that we've been watching to win or kill or whatever. And this year it seemed like everybody that we were looking for showed up this year, which was nice. And we
Makes
got
a
a few
difference.
extra bonus bucks too. So who knows if that was winter or just a fluke, or hunters didn't get their buck last year or whatever.
Sure.
So but going into the year, we did our normal habitat routine. I mean, I'm trying to get into more switchgrass and like I said, trying to use every acre possible. So we had some acres that just had short knee-high grass that weren't really doing anything. And so we went in the spring and planted 150 American plums and another 150 Norway spruce. Just trying to make it into some usable bedding with some food and continue to get some browse pressure off of our plots a little bit.
Right.
Then of course TSI. So I convinced Brian that we're going to try something a little different here with our YouTube videos, where I'm going to try and share some pictures and some visual aids to get you guys in the action a little bit more here. So let's see if I can not screw this up.
Yeah, we had it working pretty good pre-recording, so bear with us here.
No pressure. All right, so after some brief technical difficulties, we got this squared away. So I just wanted to kind of show you one of our game plans, and this is kind of going into the hunting side of things as well as the habitat management. So
Sure.
You could go out and just TSI everything, but what does that really do for you? That's kind of my thought. So what I did was, we have this stand here that Brian actually hunted when he came to visit me. And it's right where my cursor is, right at the end of the A in Carrozza. And basically you can shoot up and down this whole funnel. So deer like to pass through here quite a bit. And then we have some food up here as well. So we sneak in the back door from the west, but we thought if we can encourage deer to bed on these points that they're already bedding, I know they're bedding in here, and thicken the heck out of those and encourage this line of travel, that's only going to do good things for us, because this basically is a stand that we only hunt in November mornings, right? So we're not going to bust in here in October when these deer are not, they're already tucked into bed. This is when bucks are cruising. So nobody's allowed to go in here until it's November, and not even after season either. We try to keep it alone. So I'm going to share some videos and just kind of show you what it looked like beforehand on both of these spots. So this first video is going to be in this point right here. So I want to show you guys this point that's pretty wide open. This is a good bedding point already. We're going to stick it back on this. And then here's that second spot. Spot number 2 before the destruction. There's our main man, Alex. Very wide open, but a knoll with a lot of visibility in a spot we're never really going to hunt ever. Here we go. And then this is what it looks like afterwards. Look at that sunlight. That's awesome.
That's what you're looking for.
So, I mean, pretty easy concept, but I mean, like I said, we know we can only TSI so much in a year. We have very few weekends we get out there, so let's make it as beneficial to our hunting strategy as possible, right?
Right.
I talked about getting into switchgrass a little bit, and switchgrass has always been something that's been pretty intimidating to me in order to get started. I've never done it before. I don't have a drill, and I guess I could rent one, but this is actually a look of a hillside. It's about 2 acres. And this is a first-year planting this year, and this was our BC Big Rock seed, which I was really, really impressed with. I thought it took off like crazy, and that's the selling point, is that it takes off very quickly in the spring.
Sure.
And jumps up to a good height. So looking forward, I'm sure this is going to be over our head this year. It's going to be fantastic bedding.
Yeah, that's great.
Fantastic cover, so we're excited about that. And then this is a look at my second year switchgrass, and this one is the Don Higgins Cave and Rock switchgrass. This one I actually frost seeded. So the fall before, went in, killed it with Roundup, mowed it down, killed it with Roundup. Next February, went in, frost seeded it. And then I believe it was in April, went over it with atrazine to knock back those weeds from getting started for another month, and give those switchgrass seeds a chance to establish. First year, pretty sparse, waist high. Didn't know if it was going to be a success or not. And then, year 2, it just took off like crazy. So, again, that's another 2-acre spot that we're trying to fill in the gaps here a little bit. So
Sure.
and then we're getting into the carbon load here. So in the background, you've got a half acre of some clover, again, trying to take the pressure off of this carbon load. And in the foreground, you've got your carbon load. This is as good as it looked this year with the drought. I mean, it looks pretty darn good, but with my deer density, they wiped this out in no time. I mean, it didn't get any bulbs going or anything. So, food was definitely the challenge this year, I feel like. Still looks good though, Al, don't worry.
So we started out a little bit wet, but you went through another dry stretch again this year, right?
Yeah, the spring was really wet, but once we got into July and August, it just shut off. And we had, I don't know, man, in the first month, I bet you we had 2 rain events and they were nothing special.
Yeah.
So it was a battle, but I was just happy to get something halfway decent coming up. But again, by the time this was in September, by the time October rolled around, it was already starting to look a little beat up. So
how did that alfalfa handle that dry period?
The alfalfa did okay. Of course, that does better in dry temps, right?
Right.
But still probably wasn't taken off like you'd hope. So It's funny, the 12 acres on one side is the house and the barns and a lot of human activity. On the other side is where we hunt, and that's where there's 100 acres of woods there. And it's funny, as you walk from the house to the blind, you can tell the height difference on the alfalfa. It starts out halfway up your shin, and by the time you get to closer to that cover where they're spending all their time, and it's ankle high, that's a pretty good indication that it's getting tore up.
Sure.
So moving on, this was something I picked up this year and I wanted to share with everybody was I bought these scrape stick brackets. No affiliation with Habitat Podcast or anything, but you're able to just stick them on top of a T-post and put them anywhere. So in September, we went out and made some mock scrapes, and I put some pictures of some very nice bucks that were hitting them this year. Oh, I mean, look at that deer. That's a beauty in October, staring right at you. Neighbor ended up shooting this guy, and it seems like a neighbor ended up shooting one of our bucks on every side, but that's the way it goes. So, I mean, you got a deer working the heck out of another scrape branch there, and that's the same deer. Look how fat that guy is. So
now talk about the setup for this area. Why did you decide to put it there? Is it kind of a travel corridor?
Yeah, so up on the left side, right past where my cursor is here, is that 2-acre switchgrass that I was standing in. It was well over my head. So that's some good bedding down this road, and this is a road that we use our entryway, but deer use it like crazy. This leads down to that stand that you hunted, Brian, so you kind of can picture where this is. Now, we have a tree stand right behind where that buck is looking at, about 10 yards behind the camera.
Okay.
It's not one we hunt very often, and it's one that you can only get in on a south wind, so it's blowing away from that buck. But it's a pretty good spot. We're gonna go in further and enhance this. We're gonna make this whole road. This is our fire break as well for that switchgrass, and we're gonna widen it and add some clover to it, and I think it should be rocking again this year.
Awesome.
But so that was kind of our battles that we picked with our habitat this year. It was some success, some failures, but I think we learned a lot. So it was fun.
So looking back, when you're fighting the weather, your hands are kind of tied. Is there anything that you could have done differently or thought you could have done differently aside from the weather challenges? Hindsight being 2020.
Yeah. I mean, aside from turning into no-till completely, which I know is an option, it's just something I've been a little overwhelmed with so far, right? I mean,
sure.
I've tried some no-till spring stuff with the Nitro Boost, and I've had some hard time competing with weeds and all that. So, I just think I'm going to add more food. And, we killed 6 does at the end of the year. That's a drop in the bucket, but I know our neighbors are killing them too. I don't really know what else to do. I'm going to add more clover lanes to take some browse off, do some TSI. But as far as getting the food plots to pop, I don't know if there's much else we can do. What do you think? You got any good ideas?
No, I mean, we keep in touch pretty regularly.
Yeah.
you guys were doing everything that you could do. Like I said, the weather, there's nothing you could do about that short of getting a fire truck like the Drurys do, and even then,
that's
you're
pissing in the wind.
you're
I
not
feel
putting
like,
much water down, right?
yeah. So it just makes me, makes me think that there can't be a drought 3 years in a row, but who knows with these weather patterns these
Right,
days.
right.
So,
Well, your snowfall, did you get a lot more snow this year than normal?
we got some. Yeah, I mean, 2 years ago we got zero almost. Maybe we got
Right.
one storm. So,
Hopefully that'll help some of that
Yeah.
snow melt.
Yeah. So we're looking forward to a better year. That's
Yeah.
all. But again, habitat aside, we still managed to have our best year ever. And the funny thing was, it all happened from November 1st to November 8th. So,
Yeah, so let's transition into that. What was kind of your game plan for the fall for getting set up on these bucks that you had?
well, we knew the bucks were going to be there. We had a pretty good idea we were going to be chasing some good deer. It seems like the bigger deer. Well, we had. I should take that back. We had one that stayed on us all summer, but usually when that velvet sheds is when our place just goes crazy. That shift to the rut season seems to be when the bucks want to be right around our place, which is awesome. We love it. But we try to treat our place like a glass house. We've heard that before. We've heard that from many people, especially in off season and then in October and December. But what I'm pretty adamant about is crashing in on good spots and killer spots in November. And I know that goes against what some people believe, but everyone's got their style, I feel like. And all I know is on a November 1st through 10th, there's nowhere I'd rather be than sitting in a pinch point, sitting on the downward side of a bedding area and sit until noon, 1 o'clock. And, there's mornings out there that you see 15 different bucks with their nose to the ground.
Yeah.
So I've always been adamant about taking advantage of those days and striking while the iron's hot and, getting a little bit more intrusive during those times. I feel like you get away with a lot more during those times. If you do that in October, it's going to be a short season for you, I think. But when those bucks get up at 8 or 9 o'clock to go check those bedding areas or check those doe trails, I want to be there to capitalize. So
right.
So that's kind of sets the stage for our week,
So that first buck you killed, have you had encounters with him during other hunts, or is this something you waited till later in the season like you're talking about?
No, I saw him one time as a 4-year-old, but he was on a doe grunting like crazy. And I was actually sitting in the same spot. I ended up killing him. Other than that, we just basically had a 40-acre piece of timber that has a nice creek bottom going through it, where we had 3 cameras on the outside of it. And we basically leave the entire interior of that 40 acres alone. Got some beautiful bedded, thick bedding ridges. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 plots surrounding it on the south and the east side. And a couple pinch points where we're able to get his picture. So, as soon as he came through when the velvet shed, like, he pretty much called it home, and we kind of had a feeling we knew where he was bedding. Like I said, I saw him there last year, and he was kind of reading the script. So I knew where I needed to be, and it gets a little squirrely here because November 1st is when my dad shot his buck, which was a Friday night, and I hunted for that buck when I could with the wind correct, but didn't get him that first weekend, didn't quite get where I wanted to be. And so then we're looking at, what was it, November 4th and 5th were like 60 degrees, windy, rainy, nasty. And, I went home and worked, and all of a sudden it went down to 40 degrees on the Wednesday. And I saw that coming. And on Tuesday, I said, I'm going to take a day off of work and get to where I need to be. I had the correct wind to get in there. And so I start driving at about 7 o'clock, making my 2.5 hour journey out there, get halfway, and I get a call from my neighbor who's hunting just west of that 40 acres. And it's an older guy, and he calls me and he says, and we've caught him trespassing on our place looking for deer in the past on video. So we've told him, you need to be calling us if you're going onto our property, and there's none of this wandering around business going on. And so he calls me and says, I shot a big one, but it ran onto your property, and I only went in 50 yards, and I stopped. Like, okay.
The old only went in 50 yards.
Yeah, he said, I knew you wouldn't want me going any farther than that. I said, well, okay, I wanted you to stop 50 yards ago, but hey. So, of course, I'm thinking he shot my big deer, and I'm asking him, was it 10-pointer? What was it? And he's, I don't know. He's out past his ears, and he was a big deer. That's all I know, but he's dead. My heart just sunk, and I actually hung up the phone. I called you, Brian. I was like,
yeah, I remember that call.
I don't know what to do. I guess I'm going to go with my plan, and go hunt that deer that I think might be having an arrow stuck out of him.
Yep.
But it takes a lot of the wind out of your sails when you hear that. And
for sure,
you wake up that next morning and you should have been all pumped to go hunt this weather front. And, November 6th, a beautiful day. And, I was just kind of like, okay, let's get through this. But sat there, got to my spot, and basically again, it's downwind of a wooded hillside that is just so thick that you can only see 20 or 30 yards. Rubs in there like crazy. I mean, this is where the deer want to be. This is the spot on that 40 acres and pretty much on the farm. It's a south-facing slope, so deer tend to spend a lot of time out there. I found some really good sheds. I found a shed of Uno back in the day over there, and so I had a pretty good feeling, and started off slow, and I think I saw a spike in a fork or something, and then look up, and on one of those wooded ridges that I was telling you about that's real thick, I saw a big deer coming through and hit the binoculars on him, and he kind of weaved through and was the whole time doing this and shaking his rack at 40 yards, making me about ready to jump out of the tree, and it was that 10-pointer I was looking for. So he came right down, came 22 yards, and was going right up that real thick logging road that was going right up that wooded, real thick, nasty stuff. So 20 yards, made a perfect shot on him. He was quartering too slightly, but I saw him, I knew I smoked him as soon as I hit him, and he ran 30, 40 yards up the hill and did the old teeter-totter and fell over. And that was it. So I don't know what buck. I still don't know what buck my neighbor hit, but it wasn't that deer. So that was phenomenal. So that was, again, a buck that I assume was 5.5 years old. I've been following him since 2022. And if we can share our screen, I can kind of walk you through him growing up on our farm, which is kind of a cool.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Got a bunch of good videos here. So let's try this one more time. All
Perfect.
Right. So this is, again, on a carbon load plot with a little ground blind in the background, and you got your scrape rope in front of you. And he is just out cruising. So my biggest fear is showing you all these videos and everyone saying, he was only 2.5, not 3.5, but as far as I can tell, this is him at 3.5,
Right.
So nice deer. We called him Deep V10 because his 2s and 3s on his one side make a pretty distinct V, and that was pretty recognizable from the time he was 3 years old. So here he is at 4 years old with carbon load bulb in his mouth, which I thought was a pretty cool video. And this is in the same plot, just basically on the other side.
Sure.
And here he is at night. So you see he had some junk growing, and at this point I wasn't sure if I wanted to shoot him. I was pretty sure he was 4. This was the year I saw him chasing a doe grunting, and gosh, I would have had a hard time passing him, but I also knew that he was our chance at a 170,
Right.
And so here he is this year. He started shedding that velvet in the first picture. So we knew he was in the area, and then here's some videos. Working a food plot right on the south side of that 40 acres. Big hub scrape that's there every year. And at this point, I see these videos and I'm thinking, man, I feel like he lost a little bit. He doesn't have those kickers anymore, and he looks almost a little spindly. But then you can see that video, it's like, oof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your date's obviously off on the camera.
The dates are off. This was this October.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. But that'll get you jacked up, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
And then this is a 40 gap that actually Brian helped me open up his first visit on the farm 4 years ago. I don't know if you remember moving that red gate.
Oh, yeah.
So big fence line across the whole east side of that 40 acres. And we took out maybe a 10-foot gap where they want to go. And that's also my entryway into the stand that I ended up killing them. So here he is looking at me. And then here he is a few days later. So this is what I
Perfect.
walked up to, just a behemoth of a deer, and no ground shrinkage at all. And that was that still is it's my biggest deer ever. So thick old neck
Awesome.
on him, just a giant body.
Heck yeah, man.
So
Congrats again.
yeah, he ended up scoring 167 inches. So that was phenomenal. And my buddy Clark Cummings, who's been on this podcast before, came out and helped me drag him out, and it took some beautiful pictures for me. So it all
That's a
comes full
beautiful
circle
buck.
because Clark Cummings used to own this 40 acres that I was hunting.
Right.
So that was very cool. Very cool.
Absolutely.
So that, if you can't get much higher than that, I was about as excited as you possibly can get. And here we are at November 6th, and I'm wondering what the heck I'm going to do with the rest of the season. And
I was going to say, but you're not done yet.
I'm not done yet. So I go back to work for 2 days.
So I'm going to stop you here for a second. And the listeners and the viewers are going to have to come back next week to see part 2 of this.
Ooh, cliffhanger.